Good afternoon. This is Jennifer Frimmel with Non-EDI Source. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today, EDI Crash Course for the Non-EDI Manager. Joining us today is our own Product Development Director, Michael Hurley.
Thank you, Jennifer. Again, everybody, thank you for joining us today. Looking forward to this opportunity to really share with you a little bit more about EDI and your role with EDI. Next slide, Jennifer. Thank you. So this slide is a little bit about me. I've been working in technology for about 20 years now, and it's that between software as well as different consulting experiences. And we never want to have one of these webinars without including a glamour shot, so definitely want to include that. But moving on. So what we hope to accomplish today with you is to help demystify the concept of EDI, so you have a better idea of what EDI is and how to engage with the process that it facilitates. So first off, we want to begin by understanding what EDI is and the benefits that it can provide. So EDI is much older than you think. It's short for electronic data interchange and facilitates the electronic communication between organizations in a structured computer format. It originated back in the 1960s and was formalized in the 1970s and was created at a time when it's very expensive to transmit data. Hence, you'll see you'll see how it kind of smashes normal transactions into as small packets as possible, making it very cryptic to read. But once it kind of really took hold, it became the de facto standard across many different industries. And with such adoption, it is the go-to standard for today's B2B exchanges, even with the advent of other technologies that can transmit data between companies. Now, before EDI was widely adopted, companies conducted business with paper. They would send purchase orders, invoices, insurance claims, or other documents back and forth using mail or even couriers. And even with computers and more modern technology, many companies still operate this way today. Information received on paper by fax or email must be rekeyed into the computer systems for processing, fulfilling, or billing orders. And with EDI, it really simply eliminates much of that manual processing and replaces it in its place with kind of invisible electronic flow, that same information in packets of formatted data. There are many different types of documents that can be exchanged through EDI across a wide range of industries. Documents that could include, say, bill of lading, invoices, advanced shipping notifications, all the way to student transcripts, healthcare claims, and then a lot more types of documents available. So why EDI? If EDI done well, we believe it can dramatically impact your business. It's no surprise that some of the largest automotive and retail companies, such as Ford and Walmart, have embraced EDI as a means of managing their supply chain. So here, this slide has a number of different reasons why people embrace EDI, and if done well and truly can embrace within your organization, it can increase internal efficiencies through automation by eliminating that manual data entry and all the inherent risks of rekeying that information. It can also improve client delivery by getting the right information to those who need it faster, so you can increase your speed of delivery. And at the end of the day, it can really help make your business, a business that's easy to do business with. So what makes EDI unique? There are many different ways of exchanging data between companies. EDI is unique among the methods of data exchange in a number of different ways that we'll kind of talk through today. First is how it uses industry-accepted standards. Second, the process by which the documents are exchanged. And third, how it provides a common terminology of the business documents exchanged within a given industry. So now we'll take a closer look at the EDI standards themselves. So the EDI standards are really something from a definitional standpoint, something considered by an authority or general consent as a basis of comparison. So again, these are standards that groups of organizations have published and are widely adopted within a given industry. There are two primary standards employed when using EDI most commonly. The first being the X12, which is used primarily in North America and managed by the ASCII standards body. The second being EDIFACT, which is primarily in Europe and is organized by the United Nations. And each standard is captured and published in different versions that are adopted at different levels between different companies. Now, the value of these standards are that they allow all the documents to be validated for compliance within the specific industry-accepted data structures. Now, this is unique among forms of data exchange by having such a broadly accepted set of industry standards. And this validation that the standards provides ensures a basic level of commonality across all the companies participating in data exchanges using that specific EDI standard. So now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the different segments and structure of EDI. So segments are basically related data elements that provide particular kind of piece of information. Now there are different types of segments. The first being header segments, which identify the sender and receiver of the document, as well as a description of what standards and what version of the standards are used, as well as the type of document that it represents. So that's kind of the top of the document that describes what is basically coming within the body. Then you have your data segments that are the actual body of the message. And those things can include things like addresses for shipping and billing, ship dates, instructions. It can also include all the items being ordered with pricing, unit measure, quantity descriptions, or even like the contents of a manufacturing release or even a healthcare patient data claim. Finally, after all the data segments, you have the footer segments, which basically provide information to kind of close out the document. So within the segments are the segment delimiters, which are used to separate each data element, as well as the segment terminators that are used to end a line. Now, the next slide, we're going to kind of walk through an example of an address data segment. So this is kind of something that you would find on a purchase order. So what you can see with this example is that a pipe character is used as a segment delimiter, and a tilde is being used as the segment terminator within each line. And at the top, you can see basically 3 lines of EDI data that you would see in any kind of EDI message being passed back and forth. And at the bottom, it describes what it really means. So the N1 basically describes this as an address segment. The BT after the N1 tells us that this is a bill to address as opposed to remit to or ship to address. And the different segments provides the address contents based on the EDI standards. So what you have at the top is what you see in EDI, and translated is what you see below. So on the next slide, we're going to talk through and kind of show you what a full EDI message would look like. So this is the type of information being passed back and forth between companies today. And then on the next slide, we'll kind of look at what it really means. So this is essentially a rendered version of that exact same EDI document, but instead actually describes it in ways that most of us are probably a lot more familiar with than that earlier version of the actual EDI. So now that we've talked about what makes EDI standard, now we're going to talk about why EDI is not standard. But before we do that, we're going to go and introduce a new term that we haven't talked about yet, which are trading partners. So trading partners are basically any companies who are exchanging documents with one another. These can be your customers, they can be your suppliers, or even your third-party logistics firms. It could also be a trucking company issuing, say, a dispatch to a long-haul carrier, or a hospital even submitting a claim to an insurance provider. Basically, the term of trading partners kind of represents any 2 companies passing documents back and forth. And you as an organization will have a number of trading partners that you conduct business with via the EDI standards. Now, to get a trading partner up and running requires an agreement. First, you need to kind of figure out the rules as to how to exchange these documents. These agreements are called implementation guides. You might also hear them as EDI specifications, but they're essentially a written document contract between two companies. And there's a lot that these documents contain. First off, it contains all the details for your EDI IT teams to actually implement an EDI exchange with the trading partner. So this is down to the smallest detail of how to send them the documents and the accepted values for each and every data segment. It also provides information for your business teams to understand how your own business processes may need to change to support the new trading partner. A couple examples of this might be if you need to acknowledge a purchase order within 24 hours of receiving the purchase order, or you'll lose the opportunity to fulfill it. It might also include different kind of process details regarding the timeliness of documents being sent back, as well as these documents will tell you, in the case of a customer sending you a purchase order, how they will send you changes to that purchase order, whether or not they're going to send you duplicate purchase orders, or they'll send you a fully separate purchase order change request, whether or not you need to acknowledge one or both of those. So it kind of provides more context around the actual process by which you exchange documents, in addition to the actual data content within the messages themselves. It's also going to describe any kind of penalties that you need to know about to not, if you're not meeting in compliance. A lot of these, kind of penalties, fees, are also known as chargebacks and deductions, are fairly common in the retail supply chain. And so really understanding kind of what the contract says, what the trading partner agreements are describing is incredibly important. And so it includes both the technical and the process-related details for the exchange. And the best part is every single one of these documents for every single one of your trading partners is different. Different standards, different ways of applying the standards, and different kind of process rules around it. So everyone has their own rules, everyone has their own processes. So while EDI is a common data standard, how they have chosen, how your trading partners have chosen to implement EDI and the business processes that wrap around that exchange of data are all very special and unique and need to be implemented and managed very differently. So here we're going to talk about, at least to show you, just a little section of the technical details included within an implementation guide. So there's a lot in here, and we have to thank our EDI IT teams for their attention to detail and getting this all right for each and every one of the trading partners. But wow, yeah, this is about as deep as we'll go here, so we'll go ahead and we'll move on. But before we do just want to make one more note that there are different ways that documents can be sent and received. If you've ever heard the term a VAN, a VAN, or a value-added network, it's basically a service like a mailman that picks up your document and delivers it to your trading partners. And that's more of an indirect method of communication and sending documents. A more direct method is through either what's called an AS2 secure connection, whether or not you might have a virtual private network or a VPN established with that company, or you might even just be using a file transfer protocol or FTP, which can be secured a couple of different ways to move the documents back and forth. But again, these are kind of details more handled by your EDI IT teams as part of the communications network to exchange those actual documents. But just in case you hear some of these terms floating around, that's kind of what these mean, how they pertain to the process. So next, we'll begin kind of looking at the different documents you exchange and then the process associated with that. So, the EDI standards enables the exchange of many, many different types of documents for a variety of different industries. This slide here will kind of show some of the more common documents being exchanged back and forth, and each have a 3-digit code, such as an invoice is an 810 in the top left, whereas an 850 is the code for a purchase order. So, and of course, if you're in the grocery market and you'd be sending a purchase order, that would be an 880, not an 810. So understanding what documents you're actually sending will help kind of communicating with your trading partners as well as your EDI IT teams will be much more easier knowing some of these document kind of codes. And of course, every trading partner could have a different set of documents. they might also have a different kind of order in which they want to have those documents sent and received. So, really kind of becoming familiar with some of the codes, it would definitely be beneficial. And we have some other materials on our website that you can download just to kind of get a quick reference guide for those. Next, we'll talk about another differentiator for the EDI standard, and that is the functional acknowledgments for 997. So, functional acknowledgments, provide essentially digital receipt of the document. It's very much like certified mail. Basically tells you, did your trading partner actually receive the document, and did it have any EDI standards validation errors? But I definitely want everybody to understand that this is functional acknowledgments provide structural validation only. That does not mean that the trading partner necessarily agrees with the content of the message, but they just acknowledge that it was properly structured. So while you might receive, if you were to say, send an invoice to a trading partner and receive back a functional acknowledgement, that means that they actually accepted your invoice from a structural perspective, but they still might not pay it if they don't agree with the prices. So it is not, attesting to the content of the message, but merely the structure itself. But this is something unique with EDI, having that true kind of validation and response and receipts back to you. So next we'll kind of walk through a typical flow of messages between your trading partners integrated with your back office systems. So first, your customers, your trading partners will send you information, and they'll send you like an order, a schedule, and that EDI document will then be accepted by your EDI solution. And in this case, we're using our EDI HQ product as a stand-in for the EDI translator. And then at this point in time, HQ will then translate that document and integrate it back into your ERP system. So we'll basically take a purchase order from your trading partner, turn it into a sales order that your ERP can understand, and pass that information back. Now, once you fulfill it, once you accomplish what that sales order has asked you to do, you would then issue out an invoice in whatever format your ERP would deliver that, at which time EDIHQ would then take that, map it, and send it back to your trading partner as an EDI document. So this is essentially kind of what you would experience with an EDI solution sitting between your customers and your ERP system, kind of handling that EDI process itself. Now we're going to get a little bit deeper into the nuts and bolts of the process and talk through that. So first we're going to talk through the inbound document flow, and then we'll kind of talk through the outbound document flow. So first, from an inbound standpoint, you're going to receive the document through either a VAN, FTP, or maybe even AS2, or essentially any communication method previously agreed upon between you and your trading partner. Once that document is translated or basically essentially unpackaged or taken out of the envelope, it's validated against the EDI standards, where it is reconciled and where functional acknowledgement is created and is sent back to your trading partner. So that's essentially you creating the functional acknowledgement, sending back to your trading partner. At which time the actual EDI data is then mapped into the data format that you need for your ERP package and import it into your back office system. So first you receive it, translate, reconcile, create that functional acknowledgement, map it, and import it back into your backend system. The opposite occurs from an outbound standpoint, where you first can extract the data from your ERP, map that into the EDI format. Best practices are to validate that mapped EDI document to the EDI standards. Just make sure that you're not sending out any kind of poorly structured documents to your trading partners. Packaging that up into the envelope, and again, sending that message to your trading partners by whichever communication method you've agreed upon. Where it is on the trading partner side, where it's finally reconciled by the trading partner, who then provides you the functional acknowledgement, at which time you accept that functional acknowledgement and can reconcile that within your systems, really just making sure that any documents that you send to your trading partners do in fact get that digital receipt back from your trading partners. Now this whole process happens for each and every document that comes in and out of your system. So it goes through these these processes, and different EDI solutions might have implemented them differently, but this is kind of the flow that it all would pass through. And at any point in time in the process, there could be different checks or alerts along any steps. So making sure that the process continues to flow as expected, and then your EDI IT teams can overwatch this process and manage by exception in case anything were to go wrong in the process. But this is essentially the kind of the detailed process for an EDI exchange. Next, we're going to kind of talk through how you are currently part of this process. Even if you're not fully aware of it, each and every one of you, will likely play a role in your EDI data exchange. And really what you want to kind of talk through a couple things that, you ought to kind of be more aware of, just to be able to be a better steward of, within that process, and, a couple things to kind of look out for your EDI IT teams to make sure that they're in the loop when they need to be. So, first off, really kind of, understanding your role. So, when businesses change, there always might be implications to your EDI exchange. So some examples of that could be, when customers order new items, if you don't have that new item set up for that customer in your back-end system, then that might create issues when trying to process that sales order. So you really understand, when customers order some of those new items, just being on top of that process makes things a whole lot more smoother. In the same vein, it could be a new shipment address, and if that's not, again, set up in your back-end system, then oftentimes you're going to have some challenges importing that data. So, having close coordination with your customers, knowing what they're ordering and where they're having it shipped to, definitely, makes that process flow more seamlessly. And the last thing you want to have happen is some document being kind of stuck in the process. And at that point in time, that means your fulfillment team doesn't have time to act on it, which could delay the actual shipment of that order. Other changes, business changes that could affect the EDI could be changes in prices or new ways of discounting a product. Again, if a purchase order comes in with a particular price and you've discounted it, and internally you might override the price on the purchase order with an internal price. When you create that invoice to send back to the trading partner, likely you're going to be using the actual price that your backend system has for that order, not necessarily the price that was on the purchase order, meaning that you could be sending an invoice with an item price that's different than the item price sent to you by your customers. If we kind of look at EDI documents as essentially kind of contracts between two companies, making sure that those are kind of binding, so you accept the purchase order, you accept the terms. Changes in price can create issues further down the line, oftentimes for the accounting teams. Other kind of changes that could affect the EDI data exchange could be new billing practices, such as freight charges. So this is actually one we see quite often. It's one of those little changes that folks might not be really paying attention to, but definitely can be adding up over time. So example of this would be if you aren't charging freight, say at FedEx or UPS, and all of a sudden you start adding freight charges to for a particular client, but you don't tell your EDI IT team. What that means is they might not have mapped that freight charge coming out of your ERP system to the actual EDI invoice that you're sending. So again, from the process that we talked about a little bit earlier, where the data is extracted from your ERP, mapped to the EDI structure, and then sent to your trading partner, if that map does not accommodate any of the new types of billing or the new types of fees from your own internal kind of invoices, then your trading partners actually might not be receiving them. And this is actually something that we see quite a lot when just freight charges get added and then the word doesn't get around. So just a little homework for everyone. Definitely recommend touching base with your technical team to make sure if you do bill freight that it is in fact on your invoice. So again, love to hear back from everyone. If you find anything that you're surprised with when asking that question, definitely love to get that feedback. Plus, another one is how do you handle purchase order changes? Do you get those changes through duplicate purchase orders? Do they just keep resending you purchase orders over and over again? expecting you to take and act on the last purchase order, or do they send you purchase order changes? And that would be an EDI 860 document. And how do you guys handle that? How do you handle that from a process standpoint, but also how does your ERP handle that? Some ERPs can handle a purchase order change request or a duplicate purchase order very gracefully. Other ERPs really don't have a way to handle that. So being attuned to kind of what your processes are and the capabilities of your ERP packages is incredibly important to make sure that you're delivering the right goods at the right price at the right time to your customers. So there's a lot that can happen that can kind of disrupt that delicate balance of your B2B exchange that has been set up and very carefully set up based on those implementation guides. And being aware of these changes is critical to keeping the data kind of flowing back and forth interrupted. So once you kind of understand kind of what the role is, you want to make sure you have the visibility into the information so that you know what you need to know. Which really the guidance here is you don't want to be blindsided. So you want to know what documents are receiving. We kind of talk through the change request side of things, which is very important to really understand. But there are also a couple other messages that you might be receiving from your trading partners that might not get as much press as they should. These can include text messages. So this is the EDI 864 document, which is basically your trading partner trying to tell you something. This could be a change in process. It could be a change in any kind of penalties or fees that they might have in place with you, contractually, or it could be a change in kind of the standards or how they want the data being sent to them. So sometimes they might just send this to you in email. Other times they might stick it in an 864 text message EDI document, and making sure that you're kind of aware of when these documents come through and that someone within your organization is actually reviewing these is incredibly important. The payment remittance advice, 820, this is very helpful for your accounting teams to understand if there's any deductions or chargebacks or any details pertaining to the payment of your invoice that you're going to want to know that before you might kick off a research project to try to figure out why there's a late payment or a short payment. And researching is definitely something that is going to happen. I mean, you're going to have to go in and understand, look up information, kind of verify what was actually received from your customers and what did you actually send to your customers. Because at the end of the day, they don't know what's in your ERP package, but they do know what you told them in your EDI documents. So getting to the truth of what was actually exchanged with them is incredibly important. Now, these research events can be triggered by a number of events, and having the visibility and access to the information is incredibly important. Kind of research events, if you imagine, could be from any kind of questions raised by your trading partners, if they had a question in a particular document you sent them, or oftentimes we see these kind of raised by the internal accounting or credit managers within an organization as it relates to a late payment or a short payment. When trying to collect on invoices, oftentimes you need to kind of go and understand the full breadth of that particular business transaction, and understanding all the documents associated with that particular purchase order is incredibly helpful. Not just the contents, but the timing back and forth. When was the document sent, especially for any kind of timeliness alerts that you might, or chargebacks that you might incur with a late advance ship notice, for instance. There's also the option if any kind of alerts are raised by your actual EDI solution itself or your back office system. So if you have any kind of business rule alerting built into your products, be it your EDI product or be it your ERP product, being attuned to what those alerts are trying to tell you, might also require you really understanding, what these documents are saying back and forth. And again, there's always the actual EDI format way to review a document, which of course requires a bit of learning to understand what those the EDI syntax and segments and data elements actually mean. There are also other solutions on the market that can provide more rendered views of that information in a way that you can get somebody up and running within your department much more quickly by providing a more rendered view of that EDI data. And what actually does look like a readable purchase order or a readable invoice. So getting the access to the data you need is incredibly important to handle these one-off situations. And really understanding the data flowing between you and your trading partners really helps you to gain some really valuable insight into your business relationships. And leveraging the insight is critical. We focus at One EDI Source. We focus on EDI, and definitely believe that EDI is the best data source and the best data set to perform analytics against. The data is already standardized, so it comes in a very standardized format, and so business rules can be applied across trading partners. So even though folks are doing EDI differently, and then the nuances are definitely there, there are some rules that can be built that can span across trading partners, and having visibility into not just the documents, the volumetric flow of documents between you and your customers, but also any kind of issues that are occurring within that flow, really helps you can be more proactive, trying to head off issues before they really snowball. So, for instance, if you're able to identify an invoicing issue, an hour after you sent that invoice, that allows you to fix that issue, resend that invoice, and essentially head off the issue. Alternatively, what we often see is that you're not even going to find out about that invoice issue until 30, 60, 90 days later, whatever your terms might be with that particular customer. And at that point in time, the actual issue has now delayed cash payment. You might need to issue a new invoice, and the clock's going to start over there. So again, being able to identify those issues, before they kind of snowball into something larger, is definitely incredibly important. Plus, leveraging the data and what the EDI information is trying to tell you can help you understand those trends in your B2B exchange. And oftentimes we find that the companies, the customers that do EDI with you as a supplier, oftentimes are your most important business relationships. Those are your biggest clients. Those are your most high volume clients. Those are your most important clients. And really understanding any kind of trends in the exchange of that information is incredibly important, because at that point in time, are you getting better over time? Are your alerts, or your issues, or your challenges going down over time, or are you slipping into bad habits, or did a change in business process affect the data being passed back and forth between you and your customers, because they might not have included the EDI IT team in that business process change, kind of like the freight charges that we talked about a little earlier. So really understand the alerts, understand the trends, understand the issues, really helps you can be more in the driver's seat. Plus, having that visibility to the data, always helps whenever you're trying to contest a particular chargeback or deduction as well. Having access to the data that you can bring to bear in that conversation puts you in a much stronger position than you would otherwise. So, in summary, just EDI is complex. It's a standard, but how it has been implemented is different for every trading partner. So as a result, it's very nuanced. It's very, very detail oriented, and it affects both the technical IT teams within an organization, but very much so as well as your sales, customer service, operations, as well as your accounting, financial teams, all have a role to play in EDI. And also, it's not static. Your trading partners are going to be changing things. They might be changing the versions. They might be changing how they use the EDI standards. And you are going to be changing business processes as well, and that can have an effect on that EDI data exchange. So it is very complex, it is very nuanced, and it is constantly changing. But it is also one of the most critical processes in your business. So understanding how it works and how its role within your organization, and more importantly, your role, as it relates to your EDI function, is key. So again, if you're interested in learning more, on our website we do have an EDI 101 guide that does get into more detail, as well as an EDI buyer's guide that provides more information on how how to think about evaluating EDI solutions. And so again, we offer a number of products and services as well. So we're always here. Love to hear from you guys. And with that,
thank you, Michael. This concludes our webinar today. Thank you.